Video games are awesome and vampires are awesome. Combining them together has resulted in some awesome games. Specifically, I'm talking about Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, the Castlevania series, and also Vampire the Masquerade. However, it hasn't really been explored all that recently, and when they are, they're very lackluster. This brings us to Bloodlust 2 Nemesis, an early access vampire game that's an action RPG. It takes place during modern times, which is very interesting for vampire games. I also received a free code from the developer WRF Studios, so I would like to thank them personally. So after that random disclaimer, I went into the game not knowing what to expect outside of it being an action RPG with vampires in modern times. It starts out with a very basic character creation. You can change the way your character looks, put some attributes, and also the class and the faction. Then you're thrown right into the tutorial. So the tutorial does a pretty good job introducing you to the mechanics and the world around you. You get a bit of story from a couple of the characters that you talk to. The controls, unfortunately, did take a bit of time to get used to, but they were manageable. I believe if you play a lot of MMOs, a lot of online RPGs, it wouldn't be too hard, but I don't personally. I play just a lot of standard RPGs. Mostly offline RPGs. I don't usually like to talk about graphics for early access titles, but they are below average here. Specifically the animations, they are just downright terrible. It definitely becomes an issue in combat because you can never really tell if you're making combat, and sometimes you're just swinging in the air and you still make contact. The hit detection is bad, but we'll get into that later. So once you're done and leave the tutorial, you learn more about the world with a bit of story and your first mission. The town that you enter, the city, doesn't really have much exploration at the moment. I'm hoping that the world will get bigger, and there'll be more opportunities to play around and to really explore the world that is created. You'll then enter your first dungeon, which is a majority of the game. Combat takes a huge chunk of the game, and you fight differently depending on your class. There's a nice variety of melee and ranged weapons to choose from. I pretty much just went the old standard sword and board or two-handed weapons, but there's also guns and all that stuff, so it can get very entertaining. Also, be prepared to find a ton of loot, similar to games like Diablo and Torchlight. Most of the loot that you find, unfortunately, you won't be able to use, as you most likely won't be able to reach those requirements. Honestly, it took me a long time to find a shirt, this camo shirt right here, that I met the requirements for. You'll also level up from fighting. It's pretty self-explanatory in gaining new skills, and you also use points to increase your attributes and also to unlock feats. My big gripe though is many of the cool skills in the game are locked behind a reputation requirement for a faction, which those points are not easy to obtain. Honestly, I don't even think it's possible for all factions, as the first dungeon has one faction where you can give the items that you find that belong to that faction to increase your reputation, but honestly I'm not really sure of any other way to increase it. So I enjoyed the hell out of the vampire abilities. It helped to spice the game up and out of combat. My personal favorite was the intimidation. You can just go up to guards, intimidate them, and you can learn things about the dungeon you're in, unlock new, or I should say know about where certain characters are, where to find an exit. You can also get like key cards and stuff like that to take you to secret rooms to find more loot. I also enjoyed the ability to recruit vampires by biting unsuspecting victims and using them in battle. You can also use them outside of battle as well, and they can find loot for you. Unfortunately, in battle, there's not really much you can do control-wise for the squad, and the AI is, not the greatest. Unfortunately, this is when the cracks began to show, and I realized the game was all combat, and that would be fine if the combat was really polished and well done, but honestly it's not. Like I mentioned before, the hit detection is off, and when you do land hits, it's not very satisfying. The sounds lack impact. The enemies don't really react to your hits. There's no really clear reaction animation like you just landed a good hit or anything like that. Even when you receive hits, it's just like a little nudge that you give. Very underwhelming and very unsatisfying. So I would say the biggest issue I ran into was the final boss for the dungeon. He was highly overpowered compared to everyone else I faced along the way, at least 10 levels higher than me. Plus my hits, they weren't making any like sound on impact, and at this point I knew I had to grind more to beat him. For how unsatisfying the combat was, I just decided to stop playing. Now, I played this game mostly single player. I would have played it multiplayer. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anyone, which is a shame because it seems like that's what this game is mostly designed for. So despite some of the fun moments I've had and cool concept, unfortunately I can't really give it a recommendation. It just feels very early into the development cycle, and a lot more needs to be fleshed out before I can confidently say to support it. But however, I am curious on the direction it will take. They actually did add a poker game, which was incredibly clunky to say the least, but at least it shows that, you know, they're working hard, they're trying, so I appreciate it. And again, you know, I want to thank the developers and the publishers for giving me the code. Really appreciate it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this early access review. Thank you guys for watching as always, and this is Powerhouse signing off.